Blog Talk Radio.
Hi, thanks for joining us on Resilience Radio, where we explore the art and science of thriving in a turbulent world. I'm your host, Dr. Linda Hoops. If you're listening to this show live and have a question or comment, we'd love to have you call in at 347-826-7314. That's 347-826-7314. You can find additional episodes on the web at blogtalkradio.com/resilience-radio. Good afternoon and welcome. Sometimes the best families are the ones that we choose for ourselves. Today's guests, Brian and Brandon Gorman, chose to be father and son. I've known Brian for about 20 years and have watched their story unfold. It's been a wonderful lesson for me in resilience and love, and I'm delighted to have them here to share their story. Welcome, Brian and Brandon.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
So let's start at the beginning of the story. Brandon, would you tell us a little bit about how you came to be looking for a home and how you connected with Brian?
Sure. So when I was at the age of 15, I came out as a gay man, and from there I was kicked out by one of my birth parents, and I began my journey living with another birth parent because my parents were divorced, and I was having issues inside my school and dealing with homophobia and the lack of understanding about what it's like to be a gay man. So I eventually got this wonderful photography assignment in my sophomore year of high school, where we were asked to photograph and write the biography of our favorite photographer. So that day I went to the school library and I Googled gay photographers, where I found my dad's website, Brian Gorman Photography, and I sent him an email with the email link that was there and just casually introduced myself as, dear Brian, this is Brandon Markowitz at that point, sorry, and I am a sophomore in high school, and I am looking to interview a photographer. I Googled gay photographers, you're my favorite. I have an interview with you. A couple of minutes later, I got an interview with him, and it lasted 3 hours, and I wrote a 6-page paper on him. And then from there on, Dad realized I really needed an older gay male role model in my life, and he became my mentor. And since then, we've been best friends, and he's always been my father figure. So I'm very thankful to have him in my life.
That's wonderful. So, Brian, I'd love to hear how the story unfolded on your side.
Well, truth be told, ego did play a small part of the story. When I received this request to be interviewed, I was just ecstatic to do so. And one of Brandon's questions was, how did I come to my photography? I answered the question and turned it back on him. And his response was basically, it's a way to see a world outside of the abuse I experience at home on a daily basis, and the assaults I suffer at school regularly. That moment knew that I needed to give this young man somebody who he could turn to and talk to. Just weeks later, he completed his sophomore year, and he ended up thrown out on the street for the first time. And at that point, I was just blown away. I began to call him fierce because it seemed that no matter what adversity was thrown his way, he was determined to find a way to be successful. He was determined to find a way to living with integrity and achieving his life's dreams.
That's really neat. So, you then, once he was thrown out of his home, you helped him find a place to live. Is that right?
Well, that summer he ended up toward the beginning of the school year moving back in with his biological parent. But that parent turned to me more and more to mentor him, to help him with his college applications, to do his college visits and so forth. And then 3 months before his high school graduation, I got a text one day saying that he had been given hours to get out of his, pack up and leave, to get out of his home. And it was at that moment, Linda, that I really felt this is the time that you either step up and be the person that you've always said, or you turn your back and acknowledge that you're somebody else. And there was no doubt in my mind. I have to tell you, I was scared. At that point, I guess, in my early 60s already. I had never been a parent. I had no idea what it meant to be responsible for a high school student, nonetheless a high school student that lived hundreds of miles away. But there was no doubt in my mind that I had to step up and help him to find a way through it. So I did. I rented a car. I drove to Massachusetts, met with his school, found a little studio apartment that he could live in until he finished high school, and then he moved in with me back here.
Brandon, how was it for you to have someone take such an interest in you and be there in such a way for you at that tough time?
It was very new, seeing that I never had such support growing up in my life. So it meant a lot to me, and it took a little getting used to be honest. But it also was so refreshing and wonderful and felt so loving and caring. And I can't imagine what I would have done without such support, because it was very tough. I was a homeless gay youth, according to my high school, and that was very difficult, especially living two different lives at that time, living in my high school as just a student trying to get by with my grades and doing what I can, and then getting out of school realizing, oh wait, I'm still not, I'm still a homeless gay man, and I'm, taking the bus to get to the post office to get a PO box and checking it, and, using a lot of public transportation and my skills with public transit really to get me around everywhere I needed to. And really just figuring out, okay, now I'm going home and I can do my schoolwork and make sure I'm still just focusing on my career and my grades. And Dad really was very supportive in this, helping me make sure that I'm very successful in what I do and make sure that I'm doing my schoolwork. And, I'm very thankful that we got to go on these college visits that he mentioned earlier, getting to go to multiple different colleges and really seeing what felt right to me, which, has led me to my number one school and program that I'm very thankful to be in today, because without all that support, I would never have made it into where I am.
So having the support to help you stay focused on graduating and then help you think about colleges and all of that has been really part of what he's helped you with.
Yes, when he first met me, I was looking at one-year colleges and looking at only photography colleges, when my whole life I wanted to be a psychologist. When I was in high school, a lot of professors and people in my life explained to me that being a gay man meant that you could not go to college and that you would never find a job in the industry of psychology or find your way into any industry. So it was really amazing to also see a successful gay man in his industry, both in photography and his current work, seeing him thrive and really doing such an amazing job helped me to see, oh wait, I can be a successful gay man in any industry I put my mind to, as long as I do the work to get there.
I think having a role model is tremendously important for young people as you grow up. And when you're getting such horrible advice from people about what you can and can't do being a young gay man, it's really wonderful that you found somebody who really had an interest in some of the same areas that you did as well, and could be a mentor for you.
Completely.
Now, I'm sure it wasn't easy moving in together, each of you sharing a household with someone as a father and son. How did that adjustment come about? How did you deal with the inevitable challenges that came up as you were making space for each other?
Well, let me step in there, Linda. Brandon actually started coming down to visit me his junior year in high school. He was being assaulted in school on a regular basis, and the school's response, rather than to take action against those who were assaulting him, was to ban him from the school grounds and arrange to have tutors work with him on a daily basis at the public library. So we took advantage of that to have him schedule his tutoring sessions so that he'd come down 1 week a month and spend time with me. And his biological parent was very supportive of that, because that meant that he was not involved in their lives. And so that first trip down, we actually brought his stuff to the apartment and then went out to a local pizza place, because it was as neutral a place as I could find. And we began to negotiate how we would spend time in this space together. How we would respect one another's privacy, how we would communicate with each other. So we really laid the groundwork, if not before, then through our telephone conversations, we really began to lay the groundwork that very first time we met, to honest, open communication. And I think that there is probably nothing that we can't talk about with one another honestly and openly at this point.
That's fabulous. And I think it was really wise of you to get out ahead of that and to start to think about the things that might come up ahead of time rather than backing into them. Now, I know there's also a part of the story about how you chose to become not just mentor and mentee and good friends who happen to decide to live together, but to actually become formally father and son. Brandon, I'd be curious to hear the story about that.
Sure. So when Dad was first becoming my parental figure in the high school's eyes, back when I was a senior in high school, Dad and I were calling each other father and son before either of us knew that we were doing that, at least openly to one another. So I was calling him my dad to people, he was calling me his son to other people. And eventually I was calling him Puff, which was short for parental figure. And we eventually had this conversation and sat down, and because he was coming to visit me in Massachusetts when I was in the motel before we were in the apartment setting. And he, we both sat down, we said, I call you dad, and he's like, oh, well, I call you son, so why don't we just start calling each other father and son? And as I was getting ready my sophomore year of college to go to Shanghai, I decided that I didn't want to have my birth last name on my passport, and that turning 21, because I was about to turn 21, I would also want my ID to show the last name that I personally identified with. So we went through the adoption process where we first started with the name change. That I believe it was February or March we began that name change. And it was a process of, letting the newspaper have to put my desire to change my name to make sure that I wasn't changing it for reasons to get me out of trouble. And then we had to go before the court, and they accepted my name change. So then I legally became Brandon Gorman, which has been amazing. And then the June, before I went to China, actually 2 days after my birthday, I apologize, we went before the court again and said that I want to be adopted by him. Luckily, in my state, we have adult adoption, so you can be any age and get adopted here, which is wonderful. And I was legally adopted by my dad, Brian Gorman, on June 20th, and we celebrate that every year. It's been 2 years now. And it was a really big decision, especially when going to China and becoming 21, and also realizing that I wanted to have a parent that was also able to make legal actions and big decisions that would affect my life if I was in the hospital or if I needed something, because especially in a hospital setting, I don't know who else I would trust to make such big decisions except for my dad. And, becoming my parent legally gave him that right, besides also deciding that I really wanted him to legally be my father because there was no one else in this world that I called my parent except for him truthfully in my life.
As you've been going through this process, have you run across other people who have been in similar situations to you?
Personally, I've run across maybe one person who mentors, and he was a father figure to someone, but not anyone that's been adopted in the same way and has gone through the same process as me. A lot of people usually say to me, I thought people getting kicked out is a thing of the past, and being part of the gay community, we're able to create our own families, so we don't always get adopted. So that's usually the response I get, and a lot of people are usually very surprised, and they're like, oh wait, you're actually his son. It's like, yes, I'm actually his son. So it's one of those fascinating things I hear.
What about other gay youths who have been dispossessed by their families? Is that a community still?
That still continues. 1 in 4 gay youth, or LGBT youth rather, that come out are kicked out of their homes still in the United States. It's a statistic. And I've met some that have been kicked out and share my story with being kicked out and having to really rely on their own strengths and rely on what they've learned over the years to really push them forward. For example, I am a very good cook, as Dad knows, where I've been cooking since I was 6 or 7 years old because that was something I had to do for myself for survival, as well as having to learn how to get around places, how to walk different places, learn directions, figure out how to get necessities and talk to people and be able to communicate my needs. And those are things I've been doing since I was around the age of 6 or 7, actually, because growing up, I didn't have really a parental figure in my life. And getting my necessities and needs met meant I needed to communicate or do them for myself. So those are things that I've been doing since I was very young. And a lot of other gay youth that I've met that have also been kicked out have similar stories of really having to build on the strength that they already have and use them to their advantages in order to survive, whether that means going to a local shelter and working with the shelter to find housing, whether that means figuring out ways to save, how to get a job, how to talk to people about what's going on and actually be able to formulate what they're trying to say in a way that doesn't sound like a sad story, but rather a story of survival. It's very important, and I've met a lot of wonderful gay men and gay youth that have gone through the same things, and it's absolutely breathtaking every time I hear other stories.
Linda,
I'm sure that's true. Yes.
If I can come in here, listening to Brandon just brings to mind for me one of the early things that you and others uncovered around resilience, which is that when children grow up in a protected environment where they really don't face challenge and adversity, they really don't get to exercise and develop that resilience muscle. What Brandon is talking about here is those children who grow up in an environment very much at the other end of the spectrum, if you will, where quite literally, and we're not going to go into it here, but quite literally, he can tell stories where his survival, his physical survival, was dependent on his developing that resilience muscle.
I think that's a really good point. And yes, as you know, that's something that I feel very strongly about, that we want to encourage our children to encounter challenges and learn to deal with adversities. It sounds like this went well beyond that level of parenting and into the realm of having to face more challenges than a child should have to face.
Oh, absolutely.
Absolutely. Yes.
Tell me a little bit about what you think helped you get through it. Brian, you've mentioned some of the things, and Brandon, having to learn to take care of yourself, that self-reliance, and the courage to get out there and try things, reach out to people. What are some of the other attributes that you think have helped? As I listen to this, it seems like a very resilient outcome to me. You have continued, Brandon, to grow and thrive as an adult human, and you've finished college. You're doing graduate work. You're pursuing your career passions. It's hard to imagine a more positive outcome. Not to mention the family love that you have between you. What else do you think are the ingredients that helped you get here for both of you?
Dad, do you want to start first, or would you like me to go first?
Go ahead, Son.
Okay. So I know for me that a lot of it was this fierceness that Dad keeps mentioning. For me, it's this unwillingness to give up, this constant desire to never give up hope. That was something that I really learned early on in my life, is that if I give up hope, then I've already lost the battle. Not that everything's a battle, but it's definitely something I learned growing up. And, so having such a big hope and having that ability to just continue on regardless of what's happening in my life, and also knowing that, that things will get better, really was what helped me get through things. It really helped me get to where I am in my adult life, because I can never imagine, my younger self probably never could have imagined being where I am today. When I moved here to New Jersey, I rebuilt, recreated, and redefined who I am as a person, and I recreated my entire life to really fit what I needed in my life at that point. And I did that with the help of Dad, which really helped me. But the fact that I had that ability to do that and to really start this new, fresh, rebuilt life really was a key ingredient to me getting where I am today. But to get there, of course, I had to have a lot of hope and faith in what I was doing, and also a lot of trust. Trust is this big thing that we talk about that's really scary to give to people. And sometimes, I've learned that if you give a little bit of trust, you can see if someone is worth trusting. And, that's how I met Dad, was giving him a little bit of trust. And trust builds, and then you figure out if that's a good place to go or not, and really trusting the inner self, trusting other people, and really being in touch with one's intuitions of being, is this good, is this bad, should I continue or should I stop? It's been really important to my life.
I hear a lot of the ingredients of resilience, as I've come to understand it, in there. Being positive about being hopeful, being clear about your own inner voice and how important that is, being willing to take the risk to reach out and trust other people, being willing to reinvent yourself and not get stuck in ways of thinking about yourself, and a lot of planfulness, it sounds like, a lot of really thinking through how you're going to approach things. So it really is, it's a great story of resilience. Brian, what would you add to that?
Definitely focus. Definitely focus. I don't know of anything that really Brandon has set his mind to that he hasn't achieved. This is a young man who speaks, I think, 7 or 8 languages, many of them fluently, who found his way to China, which had been a goal since he started studying Mandarin in middle school, through his school's summer school program, who in China took thousands of photographs, and then earned himself a museum photo exhibit at the age of 21. And I can go on and on and on. He just is focused on what it is that he wants to achieve, and he has been fierce and unrelenting in figuring out how to make that happen and going about doing it.
Mm-hmm. What about you, Brian? What do you think has helped you? I believe that some of the challenges that we face are the things that we choose ourselves, and it's a big challenge to become a parent in your 60s. And so I'm curious about what has helped you move through this with grace and ease.
Half of the time, I'm not sure how much ease lends.
Hey, I'm an optimist. What can I tell you?
It has been challenging, but again, I think at the heart of it, it's many years ago. I remember reading Stephen Covey, and I was working for ODR at the time, and we were working on huge organizational change initiatives. And I remember in something he wrote, he talked about how important all of that is, and how really the most important thing we can do is be present with one other person in our lives in a way that makes a difference. And that has never been truer for me than in my time with Brandon. It has meant rethinking what my priorities are. It has meant focusing on maintaining my own balance and my own identity, not trying to assume his identity or confuse the two of them. It has clearly meant sacrifice because, I hadn't budgeted to be raising a teenager or young adult and helping him through college. But it has also been being conscious of what I'm unwilling to sacrifice so that I can maintain myself in a way that's healthy and that I can be supportive.
That makes a lot of sense. So I'm curious, what kind of things would you recommend to other people who might be finding themselves in similar situations, either being a young LGBT person who is not welcome where they're living, or being an older adult who wants to be a good mentor and friend to people who are in need like that? Do you have suggestions, resources, ideas? Where would you guide someone?
Let me start that, and I'll let Brandon pitch in. First and foremost, I would recommend the Trevor Project, and it is thetrevorproject.org. They are a national suicide prevention helpline for LGBT youth. They're staffed 24/7. They also have online chats and online communities and so forth. And so they are a great resource for younger people who are questioning, who are lost. They can direct you to resources, in your local community or whatever. Also, the Point Foundation, which is pointfoundation.org. Brandon was fortunate enough to get a Point Foundation scholarship the first few years of college. They specifically serve youth who have experienced life in the way that he has experienced it. And they provide leadership training as well as scholarships and mentoring for these young men and women.
Those sound like great resources.
In terms of learning how to mentor, that's more difficult. A little bit, I guess, of self-promotion. My blog, changementor.net, is one place where I try to teach people how to go through change. I don't know of great resources for teaching people how to mentor, however. Brandon,
Okay.
anything to add?
I was very fortunate to have someone in my life already when I was kicked out and was going through everything I was going through in my high school years. So I'm going to try going from the point of not having such wonderful resources. Some people when they're kicked out, they don't get to grab a backpack full of things. They don't get to grab everything they need. But I would highly recommend if you're an LGBTQ youth that has been kicked out or is having issues at home, it's really important to talk with your school guidance counselor. It's very important to try to get mental health services, whether that's the school therapist. Some schools even provide therapy as a resource to really talk and work through survival. I know for me, when I was kicked out the summer that Dad mentioned, I was attending MCC, Metropolitan Community Church, which is an openly LGBT accepting church where they accept everyone, and it really helped me find some faith and hope in being able to go forward, and also found some wonderful mentors and friends there that were able to support me in my journey and give me advice. And I would definitely recommend both Point and Trevor. They're wonderful. But also there's other organizations, such as reaching out to PFLAG, Parents and Families for Lesbian and Gay. I forget the exact acronym here. They're a wonderful organization. They're primarily for parents and families, but they also are a great resource if you need support to call and ask them, what can I do? Or is there anything you can recommend? Really, the skill that is needed when one is really struggling is being able to reach out and talk and say to someone, I'm having a hard time, and know that it's okay to say it's okay to say that you're having a hard time, because where we come from, saying that we're okay or everything is fine is what people expect us to say, but also being honest and saying, I'm not doing well, I need some help. Going to a teacher, going to guidance counselors, going to friends even, sometimes friends' parents. That was something I learned. Was I had a friend whose mother is his mother is a lesbian, and she really helped me a lot get through my first getting disowned, my first parent disowning me. Getting to talk to her and really being like, hey, what do I do? I'm having issues and I need some advice. She was able to sit down with me over dinner and just explain to me her story and tell me, like, if you need a place, you can come here and stay here, and you're safe here, and no one's going to harm you. And just hearing those words from someone is so important. So friends, guidance counselors, schools, therapists, PFLAG, Point, Trevor, they're all amazing organizations that there's usually one at least in every state. PFLAG, Point covers the entire U.S., and so does Trevor, and they have wonderful resources. And everyone that's at least in school has that access to school counseling and everything that people should really take advantage of. It's not something to be ashamed of.
Those all sound like great suggestions, and I think there's also a call to any of us who are concerned adults who might see a young person who's having some trouble to at least be that listening ear, to be able to provide that safe place to at least help them begin the journey toward whatever's next in their life. Well, as we close this show, I'm aware that the timing of this is very auspicious because we're recording this show right after Gay Pride Week, and we're recording it just a couple of days after the Supreme Court's decision to make gay marriage part of the American landscape. So I'm curious about your reactions to either of those events in the world.
I'll let Dad go first, because I know that he has some really wonderful, moving feelings.
The only words I can say, Linda, are ecstatic. Ecstatic. I'm 65 now. I remember when being gay was classified as a psychiatric disorder, and I knew we would make progress in my lifetime. I didn't ever imagine it would be progress to this degree.
And I am completely in awe and amazed and very happy and thankful that we can now, the LGBTQ community, be able to get married in all 50 states to a partner of the same sex or gender, which is absolutely incredible and amazing. It's been a long fight, and I know I've been part of a few of them. With Prop 8 in California, we had a rally in Massachusetts, and a Proposition 1 campaign that I fought against in Maine, and I rallied and helped to do volunteer work in Maine to try to get people to vote no on one, as well as being part of the National Equality March down in Washington, D.C. So it blows my mind to see such an amazing turnaround and just all in one fell swoop, every state now having to recognize and allow same-sex marriage is absolutely, it's a gift and something that is absolutely amazing. It's beautiful.
One of the things that I think is the truest about resilient people is that they are often able to take the hardships and adversities in their life and the challenges in their life and turn around and turn that energy outward to helping make the world a better place. And I think your example of the energy that you put into lobbying and helping be part of the movement that brought this change about is really important. And Brian, I know for you and also for Brandon, your photography has been a way of sharing your vision and your story about that world. And before the show, you related a story to me about someone asking you what the most amazing thing was that you took a picture of during this year's Gay Pride Festival. And would you share that?
Yeah, the question was specifically what was the most outrageous thing you photographed?
Outrageous, okay.
At New York City's Gay Pride in 2015. And my response was more than 50 Boy Scouts in uniform carrying the American flag and the flags of all 50 states serving as the honor guard for New York City Gay Pride.
That is outrageous and amazing. I love it. Well, I thank you both very much for your time and for your generosity in sharing your story. I think that there are a lot of people who will find their hearts warmed and their brains challenged to think about what this might mean for them and their own resilience. And I thank those of you who joined us today on Resilience Radio. Come visit us next week as we explore our guests' experiences with using 12-step principles in the recovery process. We will see you next week on Resilience Radio.